Hey y'all, welcome to Everyday Imperfect, where we share ways to blend our faith, as imperfect as it is, into our everyday. We know that there will be times when we have bad days and hard questions, and we want you to know it's okay to have imperfect faith. We have a perfect God. It may sound a little simplistic, but if your faith needs a little boost today or every day, sit back, crank those AirPods up, and borrow a cup of imperfect faith from us today. Let's go. Hey, y'all. Welcome to the very first episode of the new podcast, Everyday Imperfect. I'm Tabatha, and I'm going to be the main host that you'll hear on the podcast. With me is my husband, my pastor, teacher, and enabler of all good things, Pastor Jerry Rulis.
Hey.
Now, this is the first podcast, and I wanted to give you an idea, not just of who I am, but why I feel like what I've learned about faith needs to be shared with so many people. If you've been part of my Facebook group, and now that group is also called Everyday Imperfect, you'll know that I've struggled with perfectionism. Thinking I always had to be perfect, everything I did had to be perfect, and no one should ever see anything less than perfect from me. If you've ever heard of the Enneagram, I had strong leanings toward the achiever personality, which is the number 3 Enneagram. I haven't really messed with the Enneagram lately, and this show is not going to be about that, I promise. But I did some refreshing since I was going to mention it in this episode, and I found something interesting. So I'm going to read this and get Jerry's opinion of it. He doesn't know that I planned this part until like maybe 10 seconds ago. So one of the definitions for the Enneagram 3, they always break things down. And one of the little topics I chose to share is talking about the deepest fear. 3's fear being insignificant or a failure. To cope with this fear, they look for ways to win in life, reassuring themselves that they are valuable. Their core motivation. Type 3s are motivated by a need for attention and admiration. They strive to be successful and significant to avoid feeling worthless. So, Jerry, hearing that and looking back to who I was like this time last year, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I mean, you were driven, it's like with your business and things of that nature, you really strove to have recognition. And I think that's how you that's how you evaluated yourself.
Yeah.
If you didn't have those physical accomplishments, like the postcard that had your name on it as being a leader,
Yeah,
you
totally.
felt less than what you should feel. So yeah, I think it's spot on.
Yeah. So now the question is for our listeners, what does that have to do with my faith? Well, that personality flaw led over into my relationship with God. See, I wound up facing a really, really hard time. And through that mess, wound up really doubting everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Y'all, being a Christian has always been a part of who I am. I love the Lord. I love to worship Him. I love being able to do His work. And I love loving His people. But I got to the point, which I go into way more detail about what I faced that caused this crisis in my book. We don't really have time to go here to do that now. But I got to the point where I was literally wondering, was there even a God? Was I even saved? What if when I die, I find out that there's really nothing and I've been wasting my time? What if I've done something to cause God, if He's there, to turn His back on me, and I find out later that I've been terribly mistaken? I mean, I had hard questions, y'all. And then came the guilt, because I'm supposed to be a good Christian, a minister, a pastor's wife, raising my boy in the ways of the Lord, and I don't even know if He's there. Can He even hear me when I pray? When I couldn't pray, did He even care? Well, it got to the point that I was invited at one of the lowest times during this process to a retreat, a women's retreat that was taking place deep in the mountains in North Carolina. And it was a women's retreat. A friend of mine had asked me to go, and I just knew I was going to say yes. When I went, I had so little faith. I wanted something to happen, but I wasn't sure that anything at all would happen. So what wound up happening that first night, we had a worship service, and the person who spoke wound up inviting us to come to the altar. They had a prayer team up at the altar, and we were invited to come if we needed to ask for prayer. And at this point, I'm just like, well, I might as well go up there, because it wasn't that I had stopped trying. I just stopped believing that anything I tried was going to make a difference. Y'all, I just wanted to take a second and tell y'all about something that seems almost unreal for me. My first book, Beyond the Shadows of Doubt, Imperfect Faith for Perfect Peace, is going to be available soon on Amazon. Now, my editor calls it a memoir and a spiritual growth book, but I call it my testimony. Some of you know I went through a really dark and deeply hopeless time with my faith, and yes, it was while my husband and I were still ministering. And this book is what the Lord taught me about real faith in Him. I knew I wasn't the only one wondering if everything I believed, and honestly everything I built my life on, was a lie, or if it was even going to be worth it in the end. So my hope is this, that the lessons I learned as I was digging deep within myself and the Word is what will help someone else get through their own times of doubt and heavy questioning. We'll put the link in the show notes, so get your copy today, and hey, maybe grab a copy for a friend just to bless them. So what wound up happening that first night, we had a worship service, and the person who spoke wound up inviting us to come to the altar. They had a prayer team up at the altar, and we were invited to come if we needed to ask for prayer. And at this point, I'm just like, well, I might as well go up there, because it wasn't that I had stopped trying. I just stopped believing that anything I tried was going to make a difference. But I went on up there and I asked these ladies to pray for me. And there was a pair of ladies that were kind of there for me to ask. And I told them a little bit about myself, just that I was a pastor's wife. And I've been going through some mess. We have had some family difficulties, and I needed help with my faith, because I didn't know if it was there anymore. And of course, they prayed. They were so sweet praying. One of them even asked, "Is it okay if I touch you when I pray for you?"
Mm.
And of course, I was like, "Oh, yes, please," you know. And so she just held my hand and prayed the sweet, sweet, genuine prayer. And the other lady with us prayed as well, you know. And it was while we were praying, I was like boohoo crying while we were praying. And while they were praying, I was just kind of praying, "God, I need help. I can't keep doing this. I need help. I need something." And it just fell in my spirit. And I don't use that phrase lightly, but it just fell into me. The phrase, faith is a decision. Faith is a decision. Faith is a decision. So let me ask my pastor, what do you think of that phrase?
I like it. I mean, what hits me is there is a gift of faith, but just to put it in the box of faith being a decision takes it out of the realm of having to wait for it.
Yeah.
I own this. This is
Mhm.
something I decide. This is something I can do. It doesn't depend on outward stimulus. It's something that I have control over. I can
Yes.
choose to have faith
Yep.
simply because it's my decision.
Oh, yes. Yes. And sometimes we have to make that decision over and over and over again.
Sometimes about the very same thing over
Yeah.
and over again.
Yeah.
You know, as many times as the enemy tries to make us not, then we need to be just as stubborn as Satan is and and keep on.
That's
Right?
right. That's right.
Yeah, good stuff.
Hmm. I remember it came to me right about the time that we were closing in prayer with these ladies. And I remember going back to my seat and thinking, huh, faith is a decision. Huh. And I was just mind blown. I wound up sitting there for quite a while, still crying, like I could not stop crying, but just running that over and over in my mind. Faith is a decision. Holy cow. And so when I came home, nothing really crazy changed. I mean, it was still the same. We were still dealing with the same issues with my son, and my husband was still struggling in his way, but I could not get that out of my head. Faith is a decision. And I didn't even tell Jerry about that for weeks after it because I just had to chew on it a bit. So I started looking into faith and how to build your faith and what does God say about faith and what about other people's faith? And I realized through all of that me having questions and doubts even doesn't scare God away. My questions and my faith, my disbelief or my doubts, it doesn't change who God is. He doesn't think any less of me just because I ask hard questions or just because I don't have that very perfect, unwavering faith every single day. His grace is sufficient. It's not so much that it smothers everything in our life so that you don't experience real life, but it never, ever runs out when you need it either. It's exactly what we need when we need it. He doesn't put conditions on that by saying, if you believe and never question, you'll have grace. If you believe and never doubt, you'll have everlasting life. Nope, sis. We just have to believe, as imperfect as we are, that he is exactly perfect enough for us. So friend, let's stop pretending that we're all perfect. We're not. He is, but we are not. Now that is where everyday imperfect has come from. I want everybody that I come in contact with to know they don't have to put on airs and they don't have to put on a show. They just need to be who they are so that God can be as great as he is. So join us next time when we talk about reconciling our imperfect faith as a faith leader. And this time, I'm going to ask my husband, Pastor Jerry, all the hard questions. And make sure you turn in then. Jerry's got something to say about that. Yeah. Make sure you tune in to the next episode of Everyday Imperfect. We love you guys. Thank you for joining us for this very first episode. Hey friend, thank you so much for joining us on today's podcast. Check the show notes for any links and resources that we might have mentioned. And please do me a big favor and leave us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. And if you can't leave us 5 stars, tell us how we can get to those 5 stars. It's all about how other people can find out about us and the message that we're trying to get out. That it's okay for us to be imperfect in our everyday life because we follow Jesus Christ, who is perfect for us.